It is not a speech, and you must not write a speech. The individual oral is marked out of 40. It's not a commentary on extracts. You have to talk about how the global issue is evident in the work and how it's evident in the extract from the work. The extract's there to help you, to give you concrete examples. 1 minute to articulate the global issue and then introduce the work and body of work. 2 minutes on the literary work, 2 minutes on the extract, 2 minutes on the non-literary body of work, 2 minutes on the extract of the body of work. The global issue is the backbone of this oral. The essence of the individual oral is a discussion of a global issue and how it is presented in literature and non-literature studied. Hi, welcome back everyone, or welcome if you're joining us for the first time. Welcome to Sparkl's YouTube channel and looking at speaking for success in the individual oral from the English language and literature program. We've looked at previous recordings where we've looked at paper 1 and paper 2, the final exams. This is the other major assessment for all students, and we're going to talk through the keys to success in this assessment today. Just as a reminder that we've been really focusing on how English IB differs from traditional study, and a reminder of the assessment overview. We're going to be looking at those things today. The individual oral, what it looks like and how to succeed is really the main focus today, while reminding us of the key skills that the IB English develops and assesses, and of course how it's a little bit different from perhaps more traditional study. Let's again remind ourselves, we've talked about this in both of our previous podcasts, but let's remind ourselves of the main things that we are developing within the course, and therefore things that lead to success. Guided inquiry, students explore literary and non-literary texts through questioning, discussion, and investigation. The learner portfolio is where we have this ongoing journal of learning. So we recognize that by keeping our learning together and reflecting as we go, learning is an iterative process. Thirdly, concepts and global perspectives. Rather than learning individual things about individual works of literature or individual bodies of work of non-literature, actually we're trying to learn bigger ideas within those, and in particular this notion of global perspectives, what it's like to be a global citizen and the things we should learn and understand in a global world. And finally, that all-important skill that we've talked about both with paper 1 and paper 2, even though it looks a little bit different in those two assessments, the close analysis and authorial craft, how you as students and you as teachers try to develop precise analytical, interpretive and deconstructive skills to understand how texts are made and how meaning is shaped. So that's the course as a whole. That's no different to when we were discussing paper 1 and no different to when we were discussing paper 2. Looking at how the individual oral fits into the whole picture, we have the higher level, it counts for 20% of the final grade, and at standard level it counts for 30% of the final grade. The individual oral is marked out of 40, so it's scaled down to a percentage. It's still a hefty amount. It's nearly a third of all the marks in standard level. It's a fifth of all the marks at higher level, and it is an assessment that students get very concerned about, and they worry about it, and teachers do as well, and with good reason, because it is an important assessment. It does count for a lot of the final marks. So the key to today is me helping you with how to actually succeed in that assessment. So what is the individual oral? It's a response to the following prompt. Examine the ways in which the global issue of your choice is presented through the content and form of one of the works and one of the bodies of work you have studied. Okay, one of the works, and I've sort of highlighted there one of the bodies of work because that's where some confusion can come in. Please note, it is the student chooses what they do in the oral, and they have time to prepare for it. It feels like an examination because it happens at a set time. You come to an exam room, your teacher is there with a recording, ready to record you. So in that sense, it's an exam, but there's no surprises in the exam. When you go into the exam room, you know what you're going to do, and you know what you're going to say, and you know how you're going to approach it, and you know what's going to happen. So it is something that can be prepared for, which is obviously a good thing, but can have pitfalls as well. And please note the chronology of this sentence. It talks about the global issue of a student's choice. So a student has to go around selecting global issues, coming up with some global issues, or a global issue that is evident in one of the literary works and one of the bodies of work studied, and then prepare what I will show you shortly is a 10-minute discussion of how that global issue presents itself in those two, or that work and body of work. Again, if you remember from my last podcast, content and form is so important. So the idea of the ideas in it, but also the way it's constructed. We are analysing literature and non-literature as they are, as art forms, if you like. Okay, it comes back to my previous point, and this is what I call a Neil Allen quip, in 5 words. The language and literature course is a course about global issues. Okay, I actually go one step further and I say the entire IB diploma is a program about global issues explored through the 6 areas of knowledge, and various other things. And the Lang and Lit course is a course about global issues explored through literature and non-literature, and that is never more evident than in the individual oral. And getting students, you as students, if you're listening, or getting your students, if your teacher's listening now, getting people to a stage where they are comfortable articulating a global issue is a hell of a lot harder than it sounds. Okay, what are global issues? How can I word that precisely? Is it going to be evident in these texts I study, etc., etc.? I sometimes start with the Sustainable Development Goals to give some indication of these are issues in the world of global significance, hence a global issue. The IB talks about issues on a broad scale that also have impact locally as well as globally. And they talk about the idea of something being transnational, i.e. cross-border. So we're not looking at something that is specifically an issue to students in England or students in India, but it's a global issue. The obvious ones being things like climate change. In fact, you could do worse than just look at the paper 1 texts and identify the global issues in them, and then you're starting to be on the right track. Sustainable Development Goals is not a bad place to start. One of the problems with it is some of us can find it very hard to get from life below water, number 14, to a well-worded global issue. I think we're all okay with the global significance of human accelerated climate change, but it's a little bit different with what is the global issue underwater, and what can we do about it? And crucially, is it evident in a work of literature and a work of non-literature? Maybe not. Let's see. Okay, so we're going to have to get our global issue, and we're going to have to choose works and bodies of work that reflect that. What happens next? Well, before we get into the structure of the oral, let's actually have a think about what the examiners say about mistakes that are made in the very construction of the oral. I've said there in the subheading, the essence of the individual oral is a discussion of a global issue and how it is presented in literature and non-literature studied. It's not a commentary on extracts, which can be a mistake made because students bring extracts into the exam. They bring a 1-page extract from the novel, say, or the play, or a poem, and they bring a 1-page extract from the body of work they've studied into the exam. And you can imagine the temptation is to talk only and focus on the extracts in front of you. That's quite intuitive anyway. It's particularly intuitive if, and I'm probably talking to the teachers here now, if you were teaching the old course, the old iteration of this course, that's exactly what the assessment was. Bring something into the exam and talk about the words on the page, deconstruct it. It's tricky now because that isn't really the assessment, even though an element of deconstructing of that extract is really important. We'll come to that. Let's look at the things the examiners have said. The global issue is the backbone of this oral, so it's essential from an early point that candidates understand the need for a clearly defined and manageable global issue, and they should pay attention to their wording of their global issue. Put it simply, the global issue is key. It's everything. If you get the global issue wrong, the oral is going to struggle. If you get a neat, clean, well-articulated global issue that is local and global, felt on a national wide scale, transnational, then the oral has a chance, and the student has a chance to succeed in discussing this issue and how it's presented in these work and body of work. Examiners sort of say anecdotally that sometimes the global issue is so wordy and complicated that they don't really understand what it's about, and the student sort of doesn't either. So really focus on clear, precise clarity. Okay. The other really important thing is many candidates were happy to talk about their extracts and their work and body of work, and I've mentioned that. The four aspects, the literary extract, the non-literary extract, the literary work, and the non-literary body of work should be talked about equally. Let me just be clear here then. Students go into the exam with a global issue to discuss, holding an extract from a literary work, an extract from a non-literary body of work. But they're not talking just about those extracts. They're talking about the work as a whole and the body of work as a whole. If you rewind this recording back and look at the wording of the prompt from the previous slide, you'll see where it says that. It's the work and the body of work. It's not the extracts that it's talking about. So basically, the examiners are saying you have to talk about how the global issue is evident in the work and how it's evident in the extract from the work. The extract's there to help you, to give you concrete examples. But before that, you're really talking about how it's evident in the work. And the same for the body of work. How is it evident across the body of work? And how is it really exemplified in this extract that you've chosen to really prove the point with quotations and evidence and analysis of image or whatever it might be? That's what you have to do, and they have to be treated equally. So you have to do all four aspects in a moderately balanced fashion in order to score well. Okay, so it's sort of scaffolding the assessment for you. What is the assessment then, and how can that look? Basically, it's a student-driven assessment. You choose the global issue and the extracts from things that have been studied in class. So while we're talking about this novel, you're really interested in this global issue of increasing generational divide, or polarization of society based on social media use, or man-made climate change and the way we're going to have to address it in an international rather than a nationalistic way. Right? All those things are perfectly valid global issues, I guess. And you actually found that it is evident in this novel you've studied, and it is evident in this body of work you've studied. Okay. As you work with that, your planning and decision making is going on in your learner portfolio. Eventually we get towards exam day, and you have finally prepared a 10-minute oral presentation that is audio recorded. It's not video recorded, so you can have a bad day, you can not sleep well, you can have a face that isn't like your best look on the day. Sometimes I feel like that, maybe today. But you go in there, it's going to be audio recorded, and you're going to speak for 10 minutes, not a second more, and preferably not too many seconds less. And 10 minutes discussing that global issue and how it's related to the literary work and non-literary body of work. Your teacher, who will be assessing you, will then ask 5 minutes of follow-up questions that are designed to help get you to develop your ideas, not to catch you out. Okay? So that is what the assessment looks like. We've mentioned that you need to discuss. Let's show you the extracts first of all, and then I'll show you how the timings break down. You go into that exam with 2 extracts. So, for example, here is an example from a student that I taught last year. She came into the exam with what looks like 2 very word text heavy texts, extracts. The first one on the left is actually a transcript from a podcast. So the podcast, The Trojan Horse Affair by Serial Podcasts, which is a great text, by the way, looks at the issues of cultural clashes in a globalized world, some of the issues of integration of different religions, faiths, and cultures within, a non-original setting, if you like. That's it's great podcast. You should listen to it. And that's a transcript from a bit of that podcast in episode 1. And then there is an extract from the tremendous novel by the Egyptian author Naguib Mahfouz in, it's translated in 1966, but written in the 1940s, Midak Ali. And that is a page of Midak Ali right there. So a student has an extract from a novel, an extract from a podcast, and the student also goes in with their student outline form that can have 10 bullet points on them. The global issue that is there, the issue with culture clashes in a globalized world, you can see just there, the text chosen, and then the oral assessment bullet points, 10 bullet points. They are authentic bullet points. They are structuring the response. It is not a speech, and you must not write a speech. It is not part of the assessment. It is not expected or desired. And even if you think, well, my teacher says it's okay, and it's an audio recording, so the examiner doesn't know I'm just reading a speech, the examiners can hear people reading speeches. It's clear when someone's reading a speech. So that's something really, really I urge you to think about very carefully. Please don't write a speech. Structure your response with bullet points. Take the extracts. They have to be clean extracts into the exam. Take the extracts into the exam, but on your bullet points, make a note of lines that you're going to quote in the oral and things like that. But that's basically what the oral assessment looks like. So you go into that exam room with those 3 pieces of paper, 2 extracts, and 1 oral outline form, which is going to be helping you structure your talk as you go. So you don't need to learn anything, and you shouldn't. But you should be well prepared, because 10 minutes isn't long if you're floundering a bit and you're not sure what to say. Here's another example, same year group, so same novel. Students like the novel, and a number of them chose the novel, different extract. And a piece of art from a guy called Marabou, a French artist. This is his Hergé Hopper collection, where he blended the work of Hergé, the author of Tintin, with Edward Hopper, the American painter of the mid-20th century, and did that. You can't find this collection anymore because he was sued for copyright, and it doesn't exist anymore. But it's a great collection of paintings. And again, the student chose these 2 extracts and brought in their outline form, which was the role of women in patriarchal societies was the issue. Discussed it, and then there's the notes as well. So you get some idea of what it looks like when you go into the exam, what you're meant to take with you, how you're meant to be prepared. Then you deliver your 10 minutes, and the teacher will ask 5-minute questions. This is the crucial bit, and I think it's something you'll like, because I think it's this visual is very helpful. If you have 10 minutes and you have to discuss the 4 parts of the oral equally, and it should be a proper presentation, i.e. with a clear introduction and a clear conclusion, then there really is no other way of structuring it than 1 minute to articulate the global issue and then introduce the work and body of work. And the main focus on articulating, explaining the issue and how it is a global issue, how it is transnational, how it is felt on a local as well as a broader, wider scale. Then we can see this in this work and this body of work, 1 minute done. Then 2 minutes on the literary work with relation to the global issue, 2 minutes on the extract of the literary work, 2 minutes on the non-literary body of work, 2 minutes on the extract of the body of work, and then the conclusion. You can do them in the other order. You can do the body of work first. You can do the extract first and then the wider work. Actually, IB has that in its suggested outline. I think it works better the other way. I think it works better. I'm going to talk about the broader work first, and then I'm going to zoom in to talk about the extract. That's something that I think works better. Those of you who enjoyed the Paper One podcast will know why, and I'll show you the visual again later on. But I think that does work better. But yeah, you can do what works for you. But you must have all of those 4 bits. Therefore, you must spend 2 minutes on them each, and it's a minute either side. I haven't examined the individual oral. I've examined many of the components of the IB course. I've never examined the individual oral. I do know many people who have, and I was fortunate to work in a team last year with an examiner of the oral who was very, very good at explaining exactly how examiners would look at the marking. He said they are expected to timestamp as they're listening, and they really are looking at the timings of each section and checking that they do meet that balance before deciding how it scores for focus and organization, how it scores for knowledge and understanding and of all the parts. So please do, as you'll practice and practice and practice without rote learning, without memorizing a speech, but practicing the oral, you should go through it 2, 3, 4, 5 times in practice. Really concentrate on those timings. Try and get those timings bang on. You want to be like someone giving a TED conference speech or a TEDx speech, where they practice and practice and practice to fit in with that very tight time frame they have. And that's what I recommend you do. Okay, let's look again at a poor response and a good response and what these things might look like. Poor responses tend to talk generally about the global issue and its place or problem in the world, rather than exploring its evidence in the literary work and non-literary body of work. They fail to look at all 4 elements equally, spending more time on either the works as a whole or the extracts. Poor responses don't really articulate a clear global issue, and this leads to confusion and a lack of focus and development in the oral itself. Okay, so just generally, they are the problems, I think, with the oral. A good response, this is what we would expect to see, and I've got a couple of examples. Good responses stay focused on the global issue throughout the discussion, avoiding the temptation to talk more about the work and the body of work than only those parts associated with the global issue. Good responses show close analytical analysis of technique relevant to the literary work and non-literary body of work. For example, Marabou employs contrasting colours, particularly the electric blue dress, in order to satirize the female role as professional servant or sex object. Mafous uses lexical fields of domesticity, adjectives presented with asyndeton, in order to describe Salim Alwan's wife and explain his contrasting desire for Hamida. This again highlights the 2 acceptable roles for a woman in a man's society. Okay, so really interesting. It still essentially has those well-constructed author choice effect topic sentences that then frame it. And too often in the oral, students don't do that. They forget to make that connection with the with the normal skills of analysis, and they get drawn into descriptive discussion rather than clear analytical presentation. So I'm coming to the end here now, but I just want to remind you of this visual as we talked about paper one, this hourglass shape of moving out and then really focusing in and looking at close detail before we move out again. It's different to paper two. It's different to the higher level essay, but it is something that is clear in there. And if we go back to that previous slide, you can see that in those highlighted sentences that really look at author, the technique, and how it connects to the broader issue and the global issue mentioned. We're going to do another podcast at a later date where we look at how all of these develop the same core analytical skills and really perhaps how it's slightly different to the higher level essay, which is the only additional component for students doing higher level. But that's something that we'll come to at a later date. But for now, that's me, Neil Allen, and Sparkl, looking at how you can do well in the individual oral, exactly what you need to do to be successful in that assessment. So I want to say thank you very much for your time and listening, and wish you luck in your upcoming individual orals. Thank you.